Aloha, the sharpest college football podcast. This is Island Time. This is the run over of what we didn't get to in the typical regular Week 10 preview. This is BuckMetrics joined, in English we say, joined as usual by Robert Martin and Steponaduck, our guy. Robert, Duck, good to see you both. How are you?
Good evening, doing well. Excited to get into the slate here. We're already in week 10, and the season just continues to fly by. We wait for about 7 or 8 months for it, and then boom, just like that. So we'll take as much college football as we can get this time of the year, but real interesting to see the conference races shaping up and some of the futures positions that we've taken shaping out. Real exciting last 3 or 4 weeks of the season for sure. How are you, Robert?
I'm good. Yeah, it is. This is crunch time for the season, right? We're in the last couple of weeks. At this point, there are usually there's usually a handful of interesting games, but obviously with the 12-team playoff, there's even more interesting games. But additionally, now we're going to have that first round of playoffs, I think, mid-December. So we get that round and then another round and then another. So we're gonna be spoiled a little bit more into December with this. But yeah, no, I'm it's great. Like this is going pretty well. So I'm pretty excited to get our kind of extended season in just a few weeks here.
Yeah, Duck, I'll give you the little talk that I gave to Robert sometime last year. You're saying there's only 4 weeks left, but let me just put you in the other spot. If it's like the 1st of August and the season starts in 4 weeks, you're thinking like, oh my God, 4 more weeks? I have to wait that long. So just frame it that way, and you'll get a lot more enjoyment out of the rest of the regular season.
For sure.
All right, looking back at week 9, Island Time. Our models actually split. On Friday night, I was praising Robert. I actually sent him a message saying, "Your model saved me." UNLV was one of the strongest plays I had in my mind, and then Robert's model came in and just pooped all over my parade and saved me a full unit because I was looking forward to playing that. Robert's model was also right on Arkansas blowing out Mississippi State. My model was right on Charlotte keeping it close enough with Memphis just before we came on here. It seems, I don't know. What do you think, Duck? Is Charlotte sneaking into the really stealth, on the edges sharp team?
Maybe we talked about that game, and I took a position on the Charlotte team total under, which looked really good for 3 quarters. But Memphis's defense just missed so many tackles and allowed too many explosive plays, and just couldn't hold Charlotte in the red zone, which was really disappointing. Charlotte ended up going over the team total, but there was a long stretch in that game where their offense could not move the football at all. So I'm still not sure. I think they really need to start doing something though. Otherwise, they're going to be really having some questions this offseason.
I don't know. I heard some sharp guy tell me that he was on Charlotte against Tulane, but maybe I don't know. I'm not sure where I heard that. Anyways, Central Michigan at Miami of Ohio. I felt strongly about that. Robert's model. I don't know. Ruined that one, but you know what? It taketh and it giveth away. And then Utah at Houston. I really liked Houston in this one. Robert, your model didn't like Utah, just didn't like them by enough, if I remember correctly on that. And we brought that one up in our review of Week 9 too. Mike Bajakian just back to his just peak Mike Bajakian form in just getting the absolute least out of any offense that he's running. Hey, if you liked Northwestern football about 7 years ago, guess what? Great news. You can just tune into Utah for the rest of this season. With that, we will get to our first game of Week 10, and that is Tulsa at UAB. UAB, and pardon me, folks, these lines could be really stale. I put these together Monday afternoon. Duck, since you're closest to the market, keep me honest on these lines here. Is this still UAB giving one, or has it moved significantly since?
UAB 2.5, totals
Wow.
57.5.
Wow. Oh, boy. Okay. Yeah, and that total here was the opener, since we're not playing any totals in this one. All right, so my model doesn't have it as a play now, but still likes UAB by about 5.5 versus the number. Robert's model likes Tulsa, and I'm guessing, just knowing how your model works, your model has a little more recency, I think, than mine, Robert. And with that crazy Tulsa comeback, that's probably what's driving the difference here. What I'm seeing in terms of the big difference between what your model and what my model is saying is you've got Tulsa going for almost 300 yards on 47 rushes. And on that many rushes, if I base my expectations on this GGAB for the Tulsa offense, the UAB for or the G gap for Tulsa's defense, I'd come to probably about 100, maybe 90 yards less than that. I can definitely understand what your model is doing. Your model is probably looking at the UAB run defense. A lamb looks at a lamb chop, as I like to say, and just saying, "All right, easy going here." That's really the only difference. So I'm actually probably inclined more to believe your model, although yeah, because we both have UAB with about the same number of points here. You've just got Tulsa with way more than I do, and I think that this is such a susceptible run defense. I'm probably edging to your model. What do you think?
Yeah, that is a bit interesting. I think, yeah, and that's the model doing what it's designed to do, right? You have them as not necessarily the greatest run game, but again, there is a lot of recency built into that. So if they did have a really good recent, like a really good rushing game recently, or rather a good, like not really an amazing rushing game, but a good rushing game against a good rushing defense that gets multiplied up to an amazing rushing game, right? And then again, you then apply that back to a bad rushing defense. That's the point of the model. It's to find those weaknesses and punch them up, make them multiply those weaknesses to the point where you really see that in the final outcome. So I think I might just leave this game alone. I don't love a ton of value here, but I think, yeah, if you're watching this game and you maybe see something earlier in the day where it's, oh, UAB scores first or something, they go down this field, get up 7-0, and you can get like an 8.5 and like a plus 230, maybe that's a nice value there.
Can't disagree with you. What do you think, Duck?
So this is a real interesting one. You have two teams that are honestly coming off misleading finals. So if you look at where these teams were at in the middle of the third quarter last week, UAB played South Florida and they were up double digits in the third quarter, 19-7. They gave up some scores, and kind of the bugaboo for UAB has been they've been able to move the football on teams all year, and they've really struggled in the red zone. Even against Army in a 44-10 blowout loss, there were three possessions in the first half where they went right up and down the field against Army and chose not to kick field goals and went for it on fourth down all three times, came up with nothing. And UAB on offense has actually performed a lot better than expected with their backup quarterback, Jalen Kitna, who came in for Jacob Zeno. And I actually like the fact that the team has not quit. You would have really thought after playing Tulane and losing 71-20 that they were just going to quit, but they've actually competed well, even though it hasn't resulted in wins. Now, Tulsa, they were down 35-7 at the half and 42-17 last week against UTSA before mounting a
No.
miraculous comeback where they scored four touchdowns in the last 20 minutes to win the game by 1 point. But the glaring stats there are that they did give up 550 yards against UTSA, and UTSA had two additional first half possessions inside the Tulsa 25-yard line where they were stopped on downs. So they could have scored 45 in the first half. It was really a bludgeoning. I say all this to say road Tulsa is really bad. Last time Tulsa hit the road, they lost against Temple in a game that they were really just not competitive in. And it's really sad to say when you're losing and having a terrible offensive performance on the road against Temple. I would lean UAB. I think the number is indicative of UAB probably winning this game, but I really like the over. I like the over for a couple of reasons. So Tulsa is really bad in defensive EPA. They're 129th nationally, and they are really bad at finishing drives. So when teams cross the 40, typically they score. Tulsa is allowing 440 yards and 6.4 yards per play on defense, and they don't get pressure on the quarterback. So UAB will be able to run the ball on this Tulsa defense, and they'll have success in the passing game. And so this will be the worst red zone defense that UAB has faced all season. And so I think the red zone woes for UAB revert back to some normalcy in this particular spot at home against Tulsa. With that said, UAB's defense is atrocious as well. They're really bad, only generating 11 sacks, and they only have 23 tackles for loss this season. So they don't generate pressure. They don't get stops behind the line of scrimmage. I would suspect, as your metrics reflect, Tulsa should feast in the run game. They use two running backs. They are both pretty explosive. And that'll open up the play action passing game, regardless of if it's Kirk Francis or our friend Cooper Lega
I forgot about
passing.
it.
They should be able to run the ball, and then that UAB defense will have to creep up. And then what's going to happen is they're going to throw it to Benjamin over the top. He had 3 touchdowns last week, and he's a really explosive, legitimate, solid receiver. I just see a track meet here. I see both of these teams in the 30s and have a pretty strong position on the over. On the side, it's just one of those number plays where it looks like UAB. They're both bad teams, but it looks like UAB. I would lean UAB in this spot, but my official play would be take the over. I think both these teams will be cashing in a lot. There will be close to 1,000 total yards and tons of red zone opportunities for both.
Tulsa plays up tempo, right? Isn't that a Kevin Wilson thing, or am I mistaken?
You're not mistaken. Actually, both play top 40 nationally in pace, and so
Interesting.
you'll
Okay.
have a lot of snaps in this one.
Yeah. So my totals in this, I don't know. Somehow my totals somehow work for the most part, but they're pace agnostic. You can probably add a little bit to my total there. I just going back to the Tulsa game last week. You said that UTSA gave up 4 touchdowns in the last 20 minutes. Like that's some big thing. I'm a USC fan. I see that every week. I'm not sure what if you're breaking news here or what. Um,
They don't give it up against Tulsa, though.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's all right. And with that, we'll go to a bigger game here. Wisconsin at Iowa, given 3.5. And what's the latest on this one, Duck, in terms of the line?
Um, we have Iowa at home. It's a night game. We've got Iowa
Ooh,
-3, and the total is
okay.
40 and a half.
Okay. All right. So I've my model's got Iowa strong here, and I'll just reserve comment. Robert's model has Wisconsin by 2. The first thing that stands out to me is I don't know if there's been some kind of like secret love affair between Robert's model and Braden Locke, but 144 in Apex as my dogs go crazy in the background here, they're not liking this opinion.
They love Iowa
141
too.
Apex,
They hear that? They love Iowa in this one too.
they do. I'll just generously say a 141 Apex is a little out of character for Mr. Locke. I'll just put it that way. 78, and I've made the point this season that this is not as good as a typical Iowa defense. Usually, this number, from what we're seeing, is going to be closer to 12 or 13 or even higher. And so they're not the same defense, but this is still a very good pass defense. And when I see this low of a number in terms of a defensive apex against this low of a number in terms of the opposing quarterback's apex, again, this goes back to the lion here that is Iowa defense looking at Braden Locke like it's a pork chop. I I'm holding my breath and hoping that the airplane flies, that Iowa gets to 30. They've actually showed surprising competence at times on offense. Not in the passing game, 39 apex, but they do have a good running game. That running back I don't remember his name, but he is for real, and he's brought them to near competence here. So I'm going to go on mute. Robert, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, the running back's name there at Iowa is Caleb Johnson. He's gotten some hype for next year as well in terms of for NFL prospects. Iowa's offense has actually been like surprisingly pretty good. Um, I was surprised. I thought we were going to be sitting here with another like Cade McNamara, just very slow plodding offense, nothing particularly special, and yet here we are. But this team put up 40 last week. They put up 40 against Washington. This team just keep randomly seems to keep putting up 40 as a random number. That I mean, as an Iowa team, that's crazy, but it seems like a thing that they just keep doing. So I'm not really. I don't know why my model likes Wisconsin. I think this is more my model really likes Wisconsin because it also liked them last week and they got crushed by Penn State, even though Penn State was on their backup QB. So it's very weird what happened with Wisconsin last week. Samana liked them. They were looking good, and then all of a sudden I think they lost by 8 or something. The spread was 6.5. So I'm not solidly betting on my model again with Wisconsin, but I don't know. I think if I had to take a side in this game, I'd say Wisconsin, but I don't love that. I
Really?
don't love that. Yeah,
Wow.
if I had to bet on
Okay.
this game, I'd take Wisconsin, but I'm not. I don't think I'm doing that right now.
Duck, go ahead and give Robert the bad news that his model's wrong here.
Yeah, I am very impressed with Iowa offensively. They are leaps and bounds above what we've seen for the last couple of years. And frankly, from what I saw from backup quarterback Brennan Sullivan last week, I don't believe that Iowa's offense will miss a beat in this. So you look at the last couple of games for Wisconsin before they lost against Penn State, they really feasted on some weaker Big Ten competition. Blowing out Northwestern, Rutgers, and Purdue was good for them, but came back to earth last week against Penn State. And looking at Iowa, they're certainly much stronger at home. Caleb Johnson is just unreal. He's got so much explosiveness, and the offensive line should really cook here. So, averaging 7.8 yards per carry and 16 touchdowns on the season. A couple other things, though. Wisconsin offensively just lacks so much big play capability. They're 132nd in offensive explosiveness, and they're actually 85th in havoc allowed. So they allow negative plays, they allow pressure on the quarterback, and that is just something that I do not want when having to play against a really sound Iowa defense that just does not make mistakes very frequently. And yeah, I don't think the line is enough. I'm on Iowa here.
Yeah, one thing I was just looking up while you were talking there was Caleb Johnson ran for over 200 against a very underrated but extremely competent, like to the point of being elite Minnesota defense. That impresses me. That is a seriously for real. All right, 2-1 in favor of the Hawkeyes this week. Oh yes, go ahead.
I was just going to say one other thing too. Wisconsin, you factor out those games against three weaker foes in Purdue, Rutgers, and Northwestern. Wisconsin has really struggled this year in finishing drives. They've settled for a lot of field goals,
Yep.
and they've had a lot of drives that have crossed the opponent's 40 that have ended in short punts. So I just don't see. It's one of those games where Iowa's scoring touchdowns as Wisconsin kicking field goals. Eventually, they'll be at the point where they have to go for it on fourth down, and they'll be in desperation mode. That would be early in the third quarter. I'd say Iowa should win this game by a couple scores.
In fact, they had that problem at USC against a very obliging defense, too. This Iowa defense is not nearly what it typically is, but I can guarantee you it's well ahead of where USC is defensively. I'm comfortable saying that. From there, we go to the ACC. Louisville at Clemson. Sorry to make you the gopher on the lines here, Duck. Do you have the latest side on this one?
I do. Let me grab it here. Let's see here. We have got Clemson. Sorry, I'm trying to locate it here. Here we go. Clemson is minus 10. The total is
Okay.
between 62.5 and 63.5.
Okay. Cool. So moved a little bit towards Louisville then, which is interesting. That's how I've got this. My model had this as a play on Louisville at one point, and I still would have them as a 1 point as a play. Basically, 1 point game, and as a 10 point line, margin of 9 would make that eligible for a dual model play. Going back to, I guess, the recency thing, I think that's why Robert's model is more bullish on Louisville. I've got this number over the season. One thing I'm just seeing right now, just that might account for some of this difference right here. Right here, Clemson. I've got Clemson defense is basically, this is actually below average for a Power 5 or Power 4, pardon me, defense. And I think Robert's model probably has more of that role that Clemson's been on defensively. Their offense has been pretty good since the Georgia game, but their defense is, I still don't think it's great, but I think it's improved a lot lately. So there's probably some of that difference. Now, the other thing that really stands out to me is Robert's model has Clemson going for 260 yards on 45 rushes. That number is a little aggressive with this GGAB, but I could buy it. But with a Louisville offense or defense against the run is near functional, I guess I'd say, that might be a little aggressive. So I've got mixed signals here in terms of recency. That's probably my model's missing, that Roberts is probably picking up correctly, versus a little bit too much aggression in the run game. Projections here for Clemson. boy, Louisville's just a tough team for me to trust. I don't like these teams that I'm going to talk myself into it again. I typically don't like teams that don't really play good defense, but Louisville, I did have them as the number one offense for a couple of weeks earlier in the season. So I guess I'd still go with Louisville here, especially even getting, as long as they're getting 2 scores here, and 10 qualifies as 2 scores. So, Robert, you confident in your model here, or you think that Louisville might be the play?
I don't know. The thing is, so a couple things. I actually don't hate the over here, although my model doesn't exactly have it. I think my model's bang on. I think when my model is basically at the total and your model is ahead of it, that's not actually a horrible time to play something on
Mm-hmm.
that. I don't think that's necessarily that bad. I think in
Just to
terms of
clarify, real quick, that was a dual model play. I know you're busy, but
yeah.
thank you for paying attention to the podcast. Okay, just to be clear,
Wait, was it a dual model play for
it
total?
was, yeah, yeah. Because we
I
both
thought
have this. So you look at the totals right here, and I didn't put it in green, but this is Louisville's an elite offense. You've got 71, you've got 72, plenty of margin against a 61. So it is.
I have 72. I should have 62.
Okay, unhear everything. Not a dual model play. It's a BuckMetrics play.
Okay, but no, I the thing with Clemson here is this is the fact that this team is going to trip up. I know everybody's okay, they lost to Georgia, but Georgia's a good team. Actually, Georgia's not actually that good of a team. Georgia is like only a good team, but not like a great team, right? They beat Texas. Okay, Texas lost to Georgia, and they looked a little shaky there against Vanderbilt, a team that beat Bama. So they're all circling the drain there. At some point, Clemson is going to screw up. I think Clemson is basically, since they lost to Georgia, they've played a lot of bad teams and they've destroyed them. And that's why people think they're like, I think they're what, ninth or something nationally? I don't know, some made up number that's not real. That's what people think they are. They should not be that highly ranked. At some point, they come back down to earth, but it's, oh, who's going to do that to them? Is it Louisville? I don't know. Louisville got pushed around pretty badly by Boston College there for a bit. Louisville couldn't stop Miami to save their life in that game a couple weeks ago. Someone is going to shut down this Clemson. Not shut down. Someone's going to score more points in this Clemson team. I think it's going to be more that than shutting them down defensively. Someone will beat them. I just don't know who it's going to be. Could it be Louisville? Maybe. But at this point, it's really hard to see someone being this Clemson team until you get to the ACC championship game. Actually, no, they don't play Pitt, do they? Oh no, Clemson does play Pitt. That's right, my bad. Clemson does actually play Pitt. That could be That could be the team that takes them down. But at this point, I don't know if it's going to be Louisville or not. But that being said, though, I could see a lot of points being scored in this game.
Yeah, I agree, and you're right. They do have to play Pitt still. Interestingly, and Virginia Tech,
It's not
whose
horrible.
only ACC loss is that weird Mario special. And sorry, this could actually have title game implications if they run the rest of their ACC schedule undefeated. That last game against South Carolina, just put a pin in that. We're going to talk about South Carolina in a bit. But I think it sounds like you and I both feel like basically Louisville can match every punch that they catch from Clemson in this one. Do you see it that way too, Duck?
The metrics do. I don't have a strong lean on the side. A couple of things. I find it interesting. You go all the way back to Louisville's third game of the season. They won by 12 against Georgia Tech in a game they were lucky to even escape with a win. That was a game Georgia Tech led late in the fourth quarter. Louisville ends up winning and covering. And then over the last five, couple losses in there, and they were very fortunate to beat Virginia, and then very fortunate on the road to beat Boston College. Road Louisville has not really been that great this year, all things considered. Clemson's off a bye. I agree with the sentiments that there will be some times to fade Clemson, and there's going to be a trip up spot. But I'm more inclined to believe that trip up spot is going to be at Virginia Tech, at Pitt, or excuse me, hosting really under the radar South Carolina team. I would be likely to be inclined that against one of those three, they could trip up. I actually like Clemson in this spot off of a bye. The way I
Really?
attack this is I played the Clemson team total over 37 and a half. You look at the
Yeah.
last several games
No
in
way.
conference play. Since the loss to Georgia, 66 against App State, but then in conference play, 59 against NC State, 40 against Stanford. They beat Florida State by 16, didn't score a lot, but 49 against Wake, 48 against Virginia, and the offense is just humming of late. Louisville, they're 120. Louisville's 120th in rush play explosiveness allowed. The Clemson rush numbers, it may not take 45 rushes to get to 261 yards there. Louisville allows a ton of explosiveness on the ground, and they allow a lot of first and second down explosiveness. So if Clemson's consistently ahead of the sticks and they're not in third and long, I just feel like this is a situation where the drives are going to end in the end zone for Clemson. I think that Louisville is a good team and they have a very dynamic offense. And the offensive metrics for Louisville are really good. Defensive metrics for Clemson are not as good as you'd think. They have an elite defensive line, but the metrics just show that the numbers aren't where they should be for what you would have expected for Clemson, even though the scoreboard is resulting in blowouts. Louisville could also move the ball here and could have some success. That still could result in a situation where Clemson pulls away and wins by 14 and ends up covering. But I think that the offense for Clemson is really going to hum here off of a bye. People are getting healthy. They've had a lot of time to prep for this one. And they've scored 40 points in 5 of their last 6 with a team total of 37 and a half against a Louisville defense that has struggled of late. I'm more inclined to believe that Clemson will put up a big number here. Now, if Louisville can match them, Louisville can match them, but Clemson over 37 and a half team total for me.
That seems fair, and we both actually Robert's got it over the 37 and a half. The one thing too, you mentioned that the problems that Louisville's had with run explosive. How about this? You've got now actually a good quarterback that I had written off before the season going against a really forgiving pass defense here in Louisville. 136 is that's not a fun team to root for. I can tell you that gives you heartburn when your team has that kind of defensive apex. Yeah, we all like Clemson to score, and I guess the question mark is just how much Louisville can. But yeah, that's a good play. Good way to get into the consensus there. All right. Team we just talked about. When I saw this, and I mentioned this in the Week 10 preview, as soon as I saw this matchup, as I was just typing them into to my model here, Texas A&M and South Carolina, I just typed it in and I said, this stinks like an under. It absolutely does. And that actually, check my math, Robert, since I made an ass of myself a moment ago, but this was a dual model play. I have a total of 33. I have 34. You have 33. You have an elite defense here in South Carolina. So this was a dual model play on the under. Why I brought this up is I really liked Carolina in this spot here. I've got them as a 4-point dog, 8 points better at home. And your model basically has this more or less a tie. I think that difference actually, when you run it out to decimal points, I think you've actually got this at less than a 1-point game. So I'm a little mad at you, Robert, because I really wanted to bet Carolina here, but I'll forgive you. You're a good man. A couple of things stick out to me here in terms of what your model's putting out. Lenora Sellers, 85 Apex, I can definitely buy that. That really lines up with just almost kind of weighting his Apex at a 95 versus what A&M does on defense. That really lines up fine. This one I'm having some trouble with. Now, first of all, we don't know if it's going to be Marcel Reed or Connor Wegman. But Wegmans, I think they both have about the same apex. So if I take basically an average quarterback against what is I have as an absolute elite South Carolina pass defense, and these numbers, how do I say this? This is a neutral field or overall defensive apex. I can guarantee you that if you broke this out in home away splits, this number's a lot lower at home. And now this is a night game, from what I understand too, at South Carolina. Does that sound right, or do I have that backwards?
Nope. Yep. 7:30.
Okay. So I can't see to where this happens. I think it's tough arguing because we don't have big differences here and here. It's just a field goal here and a field goal there. In the scheme of things, we need touchdown margins for it to be different, but I still like South Carolina straight up here. This is just enough. This is officially under BuckMetrics a wrong team favored play. I didn't do it because I'm loyal to the do models, but I'm spiritually betting here so I can gripe at you for 30 seconds on Sunday evening when we do the Week 10 in review. This is an odd thing. I had to basically prompt you to defend Texas A&M. How does that sound?
Yeah, it feels weird. It feels weird being on the other side of this fence today. But I think I will. Again, my model's not again, and you allude to this, my model's not saying this isn't a play. It's just saying it doesn't like it as much of a play as other things. This is now down to a 3, and the total's down to 44 even. So they seem to have caught on a little bit. What I will say is that I feel like what the model is picking up is that basically, and this could be the entire difference here, because remember, a lot of that, like the individual apex, is not just determined by Connor Wiegman, too, right? There's some team. I'm trying to find the right word for describing it. As the best word to describe it would be team apex. For example, if you
Like a
have
passing game attribute rather than a quarterback specific attribute.
yeah, it's a mix of both. There's the quarterback
Okay.
stats, but then there's also compounded the team apex on top of it. You pointed out that there was the what? He had two completed passes for 70 yards. That's
Yes.
actually being thrown in there a little bit too. So that might be why he's a little higher than expected. And so
Especially because it was in the
that
last game, right?
yeah,
Yep.
and that would be against a pretty good LSU defense, a defense that pretty much shut down what was the team? They shut down another team like a couple weeks ago. Was it Mississippi? Was it Ole Miss or
Missouri?
no? Texas A&M did. LSU shut down a team, right? So if it's saying it's like second order, oh, they did this against a defense that's good, therefore it's actually even better, right? So
Mhm.
that can lead to that compounding there. So no, I like the under in this game. I just don't know if I like when you're looking at a game like this and Texas A&M doing as well as they did last week, right? Again, this game could definitely go under. That's fine. But if you're looking at a game like this when it's now we're at a margin of a 3 instead of a 4, this isn't even a field goal anymore. This is now like if Texas A&M just scores a touchdown and South Carolina isn't able to answer that, then you lose that, right? So now if Texas A&M scores early in this game, maybe you can grab South Carolina plus like a 7.5. I like that, but I don't know if I love the like at the point where it is now. That's my take on that.
Very fair. But I just want to point out something. You just used a throwaway line. If they score a touchdown, like we're talking about North Texas and Memphis, this is very different. I don't know. And I'm guessing that the totals come down from this 46 and a half. Let me see if I can find that if you don't have that all.
44.
Okay, that makes sense. That movement makes sense. This almost has a feel of your typical Big Ten West game of the past few seasons. So, Duck, you were talking when we were talking about Clemson about how sneaky good South Carolina is. I think I've got them as like the second or best third defense in the entirety of FBS, and I especially love that kind of team at home. Weirdly, I really like that kind of team at home who's not really that good on offense because they're going to try to ball control at it, and it's going to just I see a smaller number of possessions in this one. A lot of clock running, although probably a lot of three and outs too, but not really a quick pace that I see here, just in this venue. How do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, there's a lot going on here. So both teams play methodical on offense. They're outside the top 80 in pace. And so you will have limited possessions and you'll have limited plays. South Carolina does have a really underrated defense. The offense has been feast or famine, but they do allow way too many sacks. They allow way too many negative plays. Sellers has been sacked 25 times, and they've rotated a few other guys in there. South Carolina has surrendered 32 sacks on the season, and that is not good when going up against the A&M defensive line that really took over in the second half last week against LSU. The reason A&M won the game and pulled away is because that defensive line started swarming Nussberger, and he could not make reads and complete passes in the second half. And so
Point out
it's
real
going to
quick
be
too. Sellers is a very athletic quarterback. If you've seen this guy run, this isn't like sacking Miller Moss. All respect to my guy,
no.
number 7. This is a different kind of animal. If you're ever giving up that many sacks, you've got some serious issues.
Are they going to cut him loose though? He's averaging 2.9 yards per carry. He has 247 rushing yards on the season, and 75 of that came on one play. So they got to start to cut him loose a little bit. I think they've really
Yeah.
tried to limit his exposure in the run game, which if you just cut a guy loose and let him play, he'll probably be a lot better. But I think it'll be interesting because again, South Carolina, they just allow too many negative plays. They get tackled behind the line of scrimmage. Their offensive line has been overwhelmed at times, and they've turned around and done that on the defensive side too to other teams, right? And you mentioned
Yep.
A&M. I think it's really strange that You've got Marcel Reed, you've got Connor Wegman, you've got this kind of balance of power between who's going to be the number one guy. It seems like A&M has played exceedingly better with Reed in at quarterback, and yet they continue to go back to Wegman time and time again, which is really befuddling to me. I don't really understand the move there, especially when I think Reed has played really well, right? He's got a 6.0 touchdown to interception ratio.
Yeah.
He's athletic. He's much more dynamic than Wegman. That's the guy I would play, but neither here nor there. You've got two teams that play at a really slow pace. They both run the ball 2-to-1 ratio, so it's going to be run heavy. And both of these defenses are pretty good at limiting run play explosiveness. So if you're going to have
Mhm.
drives that are going to be
Yeah.
long, methodical, time consuming 12 or 14 play drives, it's going to bleed the clock. It's going to be limiting possessions. And so then the next thing that I look at is how's the red zone defense? And so when you factor in A&M's red zone defense, they've only allowed 10 red zone touchdowns all season on 19 trips. And South Carolina has allowed 10 red zone touchdowns on 20 attempts. You do the math, looks like each team will get in the red zone 2 or 3 times and they'll score one red zone touchdown and the rest will be. This has 1916 written all over it, in my opinion. You've got a field goal battle, you've got a field position battle with the punt game. These teams are going to lean into the run game, which is not going to have a lot of explosiveness. It'll be a field possession game, and you just hope to hang in there and give your team a shot to possess the ball at the end and have a chance to win. 44 is a low total, but it's really not with these teams with the new clock rules that where obviously the clock
Yep.
doesn't stop after a first down. When you do accumulate a first down, it's 20 seconds or 17 seconds. That clock can continue to roll. You do that 2 or 3 times and then punt. You lose a lot of time, right? It's going to be one of those limited possession games and one of those classic SEC slugfests here. I believe we have what we need to necessitate an underplay. I don't think the total's low enough. I would put it about 39 and a half. So I'd go under 44.
Agree. And one thing you hit on this, but just to be more explicit here, certainly when you're making the point, you've got two elite run defenses here, just absolutely elite run defenses. So if there are long drives, they're going to include a lot of third downs. So they're not just going to be long in yardage, they're going to be of the 14 play variety. How about on
Yeah,
a
and
side? Go ahead, please.
to reinforce that point too, another good thing to look at when you're talking about third down conversions is how these teams play. When you look at South Carolina, they're only converting 33% of their third downs, and Texas A&M is converting 45%. However, South Carolina's defense plays their best on third down, only allowing 33%, and A&M is allowing that as well, 33.33, 37 of 111. So both of these defenses rise up on third down and are very good at getting off the field. So there's going to be it's going to be a lot of work in order to get the ball down the field. You're going to have exceptional execution here. Um, the line agrees with the movement, right? It's now A&M -3. I would look for a 3.5, which I think you can still find a rogue 3.5 out there. But yeah, I would play the Gamecocks in this situation. A&M is just such a strange team, right? They're winning games, but they're not winning games in an overly impressive fashion, especially against some of the competition that they've played. They did end up pulling away against Florida, beat Bowling Green by 6, won a squeaker against Arkansas, won a squeaker against Mississippi State, and then they ended up pulling away last week in part due to the exceptional play of the defensive line. But they were down the entire first half, and at one point in that game, they were plus 300 live to come back and win. So it was not a cruiser win for A&M. So I think that this
Yeah.
is a spot where I'd be on the Gamecocks if at the line you have at -4. If that's where it was at, I'd be on the Gamecocks. I'd say 3.5 is a play on South Carolina.
This also seems like such a like a typical letdown spot too, in that you're coming off a big home win and you're playing at a place that's everybody knows it's tough, but it's usually like the venue is tougher than the team, and you've got a defense that is so good that it's just a lot is lining up here. Definitely for the under, and you and I agree for the Gamecocks here as well. All right.
Yeah, the only thing, real quick, the only
Yeah.
last thing I'll say about maybe no letdown because they've got New Mexico State on deck, so they should be fully focused here. The letdown could be next week when they're laying 42.5 at home against New Mexico State and they only win by 21. That's what I would maybe think about a letdown spot, but could be.
Fair point. Although I don't, that's one of those games where New Mexico State might not get past the 50-yard line. So, yeah. All right. Couple games here where the models don't necessarily disagree to an extent where it's like, Robert, why you keep me from playing this? But bigger games where I think it'd just be fun to talk about what our model's seeing here. The game of the weekend here is Ohio State at Penn State. Is this still 3.5?
3.
Or has it moved? Okay. Interesting. What's just crazy is my model is very venue specific, not only for this game, but in looking back on prior performances too. When I was just creating this slide, and I'm just doing this, it's crazy how similar these numbers are. The apex for these two teams is within a point. Literally the same offensive GGAP per game. The offensive explosivity of the passing game is literally the same. Defensive apex, Penn State elite, Ohio State just about elite. Run defense, elite and elite. And you stack this up, and it's like the model says, somehow infers James Franklin and says, yeah, Ohio State's going to win by a score. Both of our models say so. I don't even understand it. I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get it. I actually thought that Ohio State had a weak strength of schedule. Now, Robert pointed out a couple weeks ago that Penn State also has a weak strength of schedule, although I think that was just kind of take a shot at my Trojans. Thank you, Robert. Here's where I can't argue with my own numbers, but I'm just going to say, I don't know if I'm just pointing this out. Robert's got, for as remarkably consistent as these are, maybe this, well, even then, we'll come back to this in a second, but Robert's got a great rushing game a very good rushing game for Ohio State, and he has Penn State, relatively struggling to run the ball. Based on these metrics over here, we should be seeing about the same. Now, this is where I got stuck for a second. My fallback position, sub theme of this episode would be, recency. But what was the most recent thing we saw was Ohio State struggling to run the ball in their most recent game. That was not impressive. Now, Nebraska's got a good run defense, sure. Having said that, I've got all the metrics that say tie game, and somehow our models both kind of land on a one-score Ohio State win, and I guess I'm going to go with that. I'm definitely not betting this, although in theory, if the wrong team's favored, not by a significant margin, Penn State would be the play. I don't know. I've got really mixed signals here. Not playing this, but this is a fascinating one to talk about. Do you have any more clarity than I do on this one, Robert? Other than starting with
Yeah,
James Franklin, okay? Don't start there.
this game is fascinating. I think this is like ground. This game is I think in many ways it's like an elimination game for the playoff. But although it's not, it is because, or at least for the Big 12, a Big 10 championship game, right?
Yeah.
Because if Ohio State loses this game, they might just be done, period. Because they still have Indiana coming up, and they have, actually, they'll survive Michigan. But there is another potential loss on the schedule if they lose this game. For Penn State, they actually can afford to lose this game, but then they can't afford to mess up another game. And they have another couple. I think they have Oregon. No, they don't have Oregon. They have someone else coming up, I think. But this is the
UCLA.
thing.
That's the tough game you're thinking about.
Yes, UCLA. It's tricky where these games now take on more meaning, whereas before it'd been like, oh, this is like an elimination game. Now it's an elimination from the championship game. You can still make the playoff, et cetera, et cetera. But I think the loser of this game doesn't make the playoff because I think there's another team somewhere that could trip up the loser of this game and knock them out. So I'm fascinated to see this game. Although my model does like Ohio State, my gut says Penn State here, actually. I know it sounds crazy. These teams usually do play pretty close, but at the same time, I don't love this Ohio State team. I think there's something off with them this year. Yeah, they lost to Oregon very narrowly, but Oregon played a good game, but not the best. But this Ohio State team did not take care of business against Nebraska. Something's off, and I think this Penn State team, far from a dominant Penn State team, very far from it. But like I feel like Ohio State is the right side, but I'm not taking it. I'm just gonna sit back and watch this game and just enjoy this game because I think it's gonna be a pretty cool game. So I will sit back and enjoy this game, but That's my take on this. I just want to see a nice, fun game. Both teams have fun and all that, and we'll see what comes of it. But no, this game is fascinating to watch, and I think the loser of this game may not make it to the playoffs.
Well, I was looking up the Penn State schedule. They don't really have a tough game after this. They've got two they can lose if they just get into real stupid territory versus Washington and Minnesota. Dangerous for in different ways, but competent of capitalizing on a series of mistakes. All right, just push comes to shove. You have to just pick one side here. Not to play. We're not betting this one clearly, but if you think which team is going to win, if you had to pick one, I'm guessing Penn State just based on your kind of
I
negative bent. Ohio
yeah,
State's on the road.
I Penn State. Remember, my model is agnostic of this home stadium. My model pretty
Ah,
much plays everything a neutral field, and I think for a
interesting.
lot of college football games that doesn't matter, but I think for this particular stadium it matters.
Okay. Yeah, Duck, what are your feelings on this one?
I have too many real questions right now to want to take out a strong position. Has Drew Aller been ruled in? I think it's game time decision. I know he practiced yesterday in limited participation, but they're still saying game time decision. Now it could be gamesmanship by Big Game James. Man, that's a lot to say. But has he been ruled in? A concern I have with the rushing projection metrics for Ohio State is they have two offensive linemen that are out, and they're key important players. And Ohio State could not run the football against Nebraska. While Nebraska does have a stout run defense and they have some real thick, big corn fed boys up front, 65 yards is just not going to get it done in this environment. And so I am concerned about Ohio State's ability to run the ball. And with two starting offensive linemen down, going up against an elite front seven of Penn State, can they protect the passer? And I'm not certain that they can. Now, one way that I would play this, I heard another sharp guy mention that he liked the over in this one. Now, the over under is ticked down to 45. But
Wow.
in the last several games for each team, the game script has gone something like punt or punt, field goal, punt. You look at Penn State's last three: 0-0 against UCLA after the first quarter, 7-3 against against USC, 3-0 against against Wisconsin. Similar nature for Ohio State: 7-0 against Iowa, 7-6 against Oregon, and 7-0 against Nebraska. But both of these teams start slow. And so what I could see is in this heavyweight bout, you've got two teams that are feeling each other out. Questions at the quarterback position for Penn State. The offensive line has some major questions for Ohio State. I could see this one going punt early. And if you like over, you can probably wait until about 6 minutes left in the third quarter or in the first quarter, and you can get a live over 37 and a half or so. So if you're going to take the over, I would wait and play it live. If Aller plays, I Penn State. Although it's really difficult with the track record of James Franklin playing teams named Ohio State and Michigan. He's 3-17 and he has just not gotten it done. So you're certainly going against the grain with history. I wish I had a stronger take on this one for you. If I had a revolver to my head, I would take Penn State against the number at 3-3.5. But I think again, I know a couple guys who like the over. I would wait since it's come down to 45. I would wait. Let's see the couple of punts traded first. Take something, snag a 37.5 live, and then maybe it opens up in the second quarter and beyond.
I gotta say, this is the first time we've done a game like this where there's no plays on either model, and it's just like we showed up for the exam just without studying at all. We have some ideas that we heard in class, but boy, we go through games. There's usually a lot more conviction. This is a lot of this is, but which means this is going to be a fascinating one to watch. That this is definitely it. It's just so many unknowns, but still relatively high caliber. You've got two legitimate top five teams, but far from perfect teams. It's just I don't know. It's like a telenovela of just you've got all the elements here of just a good game that's going to be watched. Really, it feels like it should be a one score game. Robert's model notwithstanding the 9 point margin. It feels like a field goal kind of game either way.
Yeah, and 2 points I'll make on that. And for your loyal listeners, not having a play can be just as sharp as having a position on a game, right? When there's 60 or
Yeah.
70 games to choose from each week and you're
Yep.
isolating 8, 9, 10 at max to make a position on. When you're betting real hard earned money on these games, it can be really okay to just watch the game as a fan of the sport and watch the game with intent to learn about both teams, especially with
Yeah.
the questions that we have with both offenses and key personnel being out. It can be a sign to be sharp and just decide, yeah, I'm going to hold off. Or if you have a number that you love, just wait until you can see it live and then maybe take a position if you like what you've seen in game. And the other thing is, just as fans of the greatest sport on planet Earth, sometimes you
No.
just kick back and you have it on the primary TV and you're just watching the game as a fan. And I think that's okay too. So both of those things are okay, but it is a sign of sharp handicappers when you don't have a strong conviction. Sometimes it's best just to hold off, right?
Yeah, that's a lesson I learned at the racetrack. You're betting basically anywhere between 118 minus 118 and minus 125 depending on the kind of bet you're playing. And I want to say you learn really quick that there's virtue in passing races, but in my case real quick was 34 years, so I'm a slow study, but eventually I got there. Thank you very much. Yeah, a lot to be said for that though. Good point. Last game, it's throwing a bone to Robert here after picking on him so much. We get to talk about how great his team is, Oregon, giving almost a suspiciously short 14 and a half just at my first glance. What's interesting too is I don't have anything in red here. I don't see anything basically that's really too offensive other than this number here with Dylan Gabriel. That seems a little crazy, but you know what? It wouldn't surprise me that much. I could, if Sunday or Saturday night when I'm going through the box scores with my cigars on the balcony, and if I see as a 235 apex, I wouldn't be shocked. Be like, oh, okay, he just had an extreme Dylan Gabriel game. Both teams struggling to run the ball. This is really struggling for Michigan considering that they don't pass the ball. For example, Jack Tuttle with another extreme number here. Jack Tuttle -2 apex, but would that surprise me? Nope. I've said this for a while. I've got Oregon as a really good team. I didn't color code this correctly. If I don't have either of these as a 10, I think you're like in that second cut. And I know that puts me on the outside looking in as their number one by basically everybody, including the beloved and much admired Robert model. But that's where we're just different. You've got a Michigan team here that struggles clearly on offense. They're not nearly as good as Oregon on defense. Michigan does have the home field. I've got Oregon by 9, which goes against my initial inkling of the 14. Robert's got them by 20 here. This 31 actually feels a little low to me too. I'd look more towards the mid 30s than the low 30s here. I can definitely see I like Robert's number here more than mine in terms of the Michigan total. This is just not a functional offense, and I don't know. Maybe they should go look at one of FIU's quarterbacks since they want just like an instant interception. They can go to that roster. You know, I'm not going to go against the model here, especially since my model has a 9-point game. But I just, my gut and just my instinct and everything I know about football, which is not that much outside of my model, just says Oregon is way better than 2 scores here, even if it is at a tough venue. Robert, sorry.
Yeah, it's really funny. You said that Jack Tuttle having a -2 apex would not be surprising to you. It would be surprising to me because he is medically retired from football this week.
Tell it to your model, buddy.
Yeah, I
I
know.
was
No,
going
I
to ask
know,
who the
man.
model had in there.
Yeah, no, because the problem is the fact that it uses the quarterback who had the most passing snaps in the last game, which was Jack Tuttle before he got injured, and now he's no longer the quarterback. So I don't even know who the quarterback is. Does it really matter? I also don't think it does really. I don't think any of them. I didn't know Jack Tuttle was even on the Michigan team. And because he wasn't like, usually you're like, oh, there's a starting quarterback and then there's the backup quarterback. When we do the preseason analysis, we don't dig down to, oh, they got the quarterback from one of those bad Indiana teams and that's their third. Like we don't talk about that. We don't have to dig that deep usually. And now he was a starting quarterback and now he's just not. He's just medically retired because of a concussion. Unfortunate for him, but okay, that's again, this season just keeps going from bad to worse here for Michigan. I don't know who the starting quarterback is, and between their other two main starters, I don't think it really matters. If you're at a point when you're going to your third string and that you're like that's the viable option, I don't think it really matters who your top two are. I don't think they're that much better than the third ones. Maybe 14 and a half seems suspiciously low. I think that might just be because you're traveling cross country. That's the
Yeah.
only thing I can think of. But outside of that, like I see no reason this should be 14.5. And it's, again, Dylan Gabriel has taken the lead in the Heisman, which is the famous last words for Oregon quarterback there. But I think if there's a game that because it's weird because people will start hyping up these guys, they'll be like, oh man, he had such a great game. And it'll be like a couple of games too late. It'll be like, but if he does have a really good game, they'll be like, oh man, Dylan Gabriel was amazing. And then, like, we didn't talk about him when he beat Ohio State. We're going to talk about him now because he had really great passing stats against Michigan. I don't know. Maybe that's what this game is going to be. I don't know. But yeah, I don't, I'm probably not going to play this. Maybe play some Dylan Gabriel plays, but just some Dylan Gabriel props. But honestly, I don't love this spread. It seems suspiciously low to me.
Can't disagree. Yeah, yeah. Then I'll just keep it at that. Duck, what do you see any kind of playable angle here? Or are you just going to enjoy this for it's competitive, like for the first 12 minutes?
I just don't see how you could take out a position on Michigan. They've struggled so badly on offense, even at home against competent football teams. They just have struggled to move the football. At times, it's just next to impossible to see them achieve a first down and put a drive together to get into the red zone. It's just been
Another shot
really
at my
brutal.
Trojans here. I'm a punching bag here. Go on. Sorry.
Trojans are in the midst of a tough season this year,
Yeah.
indirectly at them. But it's just going to be really hard in a game where if Michigan truly believes that they're going to be able to win, where are they going to be at in the middle of the third quarter? Is this going to be 24-7 or 24-10? You're not going to be able to just pack it in and run the ball for 3-4 yards of play and then hope to. You're going to have to throw the ball and you're going to have to try to trade score for score against Oregon. And Oregon has been, since the big win against Ohio State, 73-9 outscored Purdue and Illinois. And Illinois is a much better football team than Michigan, and they just dispatched them with ease. The defense for Oregon is playing lights out. It's such an atypical Oregon looking team when you think about the Oregon Ducks and the high flying offense and hold them under 40 and we're going to win the game on defense, but it's just not that. Teams are struggling to move the ball against Oregon and they're not scoring a lot of points, and goodness sakes, you got four of the 5 conference games these teams have scored a combined total of 32 outside of the Ohio State game. So what's Michigan good for here? 10? 13
Yeah.
maybe. So all I could do is lay it with Oregon, and it just doesn't seem like there's anybody else the rest of the way that's going to trip up the Ducks. And for Michigan, you look at who they have remaining left on their schedule, and it's just hard to see another win outside of maybe Northwestern in a 17-16 type game, because they're not going to beat Indiana, they're not going to beat Ohio State, and it's just one of those seasons where maybe they make a bowl game, maybe they don't, but it's just real tough for Michigan right now, especially with incompetent offensive quarterback play.
Yeah, or Oregon's got that same, like I said, with Penn State. They wrap up the regular season with Washington, which is like just avoid doing a series of really stupid things, and they'll win. That's the only one I think that's a real threat. And we talked about in the Big Ten preview that Oregon just had the really forgiving schedule aside from the Ohio State game, and I think the season win total was 10.5, and it seemed really hard to find a second loss. And looking back, that should have been a play, but you never know. First year in a new conference. One other thing, just as you were talking about Michigan, that sticks out to me, I see it basically like a little more functional, better version of Air Force here. It's like, all right, we can't pass the ball, we'll run the ball. Well, guess what? Your opponent runs it better than you do, and that's game, set, match right there. I don't really care about the defense at that point. So yeah, this is almost a line that stinks, although I know Robert made a great point about the travel across time zones. That's probably accounts for the stink. So I don't know. We'll see. It wouldn't surprise me if I wake up Saturday morning and there's a stink of vodka on my phone and I found I've put a $50 play on Oregon, and I just wonder, what did I do here? If I do, I'll let you guys know. They'll be the first to know. That is it. That is our 6-pack of games in Island Time. We appreciate you all watching. The numbers for this, the viewership and listeners for this podcast, as this specific episode or podcast of Island Time, has absolutely astounded me. Glad that there's so many that love this smart discussion. This is where it's actually smart, and we don't say mean things about dumb coaches. It's just smart, sharp play. We appreciate you listening and watching. Not sure we're going to have Island Time next week. We will let you know, but this is not it for the season. We will be back at some point. So until then, we will catch you next Monday on the Week 10 review and the Week 11 preview. So until then, thank you so much and bye-bye.